The Forumborium smelled of damp stone and the waste of cattle. In its open air, 3 pairs of slaves entered the makeshift arena. They were not trained soldiers, but men forced to fight until one of them fell. This was 264 BC, when Decimus, Junius Brutus Scaeva, arranged a grim ritual to honor his late father. What historian Livy marked as Rome's first gladiator fight was not yet entertainment. It was a funeral duty, called a munus, meaning obligation. Blood was given not for applause, but as an offering to the dead. The idea came from Campanian customs, where sacrifices were held at graves. In Capua and nearby towns, these rites slowly changed. The Samnites, old rivals of Rome, had already staged duels during funerals. At first, the killing itself was the point, but soon the fight became the focus. Combat mattered more than death. Christian writer Tertullian later said such blood was poured out to satisfy the dead. But by then the meaning had shifted. The living had begun to watch with excitement. By the end of the 3rd century BC, gladiator fights no longer belonged only to families in mourning. They moved into public festivals, joining the Ludi, the games overseen by the state. The Ludi Romani, held for Jupiter, were among the earliest. These events were often voted by the Senate during moments of crisis, hoping to gain the god's support. Step by step, the shows became official, no longer private grief but public business. This transformation changed Roman culture. Aediles and other officials saw the games as a way to win favor with the crowd. Death in the arena became a tool for politics. Temporary wooden stages soon turned into permanent amphitheaters built of stone. What started as a small tribute at a funeral became locked into Roman law. By then, blood spilled on the sand was no longer just ritual. It was part of Rome's identity, written into the stones of the city itself. In AD 80, the Colosseum opened with a display meant to stun the world. For 100 days, the arena ran without pause. More than 9,000 animals were slaughtered, from lions to crocodiles. The Emperor Titus wanted to prove the scale of Roman power, and the games showed it with blood. The hunts, called venationes, were staged hunts where animals were pitted against men. Some fighters were armed professionals, but others were unarmed prisoners, sent to face death as punishment. The spectacle was more than cruelty. It was a message carved into the sand. Exotic beasts brought from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East reminded the crowd that Rome ruled faraway lands. Elephants, rhinoceroses, leopards, and bears all died under Roman spears. To kill them was to say, if Rome can conquer nature itself, then no enemy could stand against it. The crowd roared as each beast fell, the thrill mixing fear with pride. But for those sent into the arena unarmed, there was no glory. Criminals and prisoners were often thrown to hungry lions or packs of wild dogs. The Latin phrase damnatio, ad bestias, condemnation to beasts, was a sentence worse than the cross. Death came slowly, torn by teeth and claws, as thousands watched. It was both punishment and warning. Anyone who defied Rome could end up feeding its animals. By the time of Trajan, the scale only grew. For his victory over Dacia, he staged games lasting 123 days, with 11,000 animals killed. Roman writers like Martial praised the sight of a lion brought down by a single spear. To them, it was art, an act of power dressed as entertainment. To us, it is horror. Yet to the Romans, it was proof of empire. The Romans did not stop with land battles. They went further, flooding arenas to stage naval wars called naumachii. These were not mock fights with wooden ships, but real battles fought with real weapons, and men who often had no choice. The first great show came in 46 BC, when Julius Caesar celebrated his victories by filling a basin near the Tiber and sending out 2,000 fighters and 4,000 rowers to clash before the public. Augustus later built a vast artificial lake for the same purpose, seating tens of thousands to watch. The men on the ships were often prisoners of war or condemned criminals. They fought knowing survival was slim. Some tried to surrender, famously, shouting, "Hail, Caesar! We who are about to die salute you." Though historians argue about when this line was first spoken, Suetonius recorded it, and the words have never been forgotten. Claudius staged one of the largest such battles in AD 52, when he drained Lake Fucinus and filled it with 19,000 men. The scale was beyond imagination. Armed convicts, chained together, rode into combat, crashing ships and drowning in the chaos. For the audience, it was breathtaking. For those forced to fight, it was terror on water, ending in either blade or wave. Though these spectacles amazed the crowds, they were costly and brutal. Thousands died to make Rome believe it was watching the sea itself conquered. With time, emperors shifted focus back to gladiators and beasts. Yet the memory of Naumachii remained, a vision of Rome so powerful that even oceans could be staged as entertainment. The Romans loved theater, but when myth was brought into the arena, the stories turned into executions. Instead of actors pretending to die, real people were killed while playing the roles of legendary figures. These victims were usually criminals or prisoners, and their deaths were staged as if they were parts of Greek tales. To the crowd, it looked like art. To the condemned, it was punishment turned into spectacle. One common show retold the story of Hercules burned alive. A man tied in a costume was set on fire before thousands. Another displayed the myth of Orpheus. Martial wrote of a prisoner, dressed as the musician, placed in the arena among animals. At first, the crowd expected him to charm them. Instead, a bear was released, tearing him apart in front of everyone. Other myths were used the same way. Pasiphae, known in legend for her union with a bull, was represented by a woman exposed to an animal attack. The myth of Daedalus and Icarus was staged with a man hurled from a height, crashing onto the arena floor. Seneca described how the arena was a theater where blood replaced illusion. What was legend in Greece became reality in Rome. By the time of Nero and Domitian, these acts blended cruelty with pageantry. Hadrian also arranged such displays. They were framed as culture, linking Rome to the heroic past, but the truth was raw violence. What had once been sacred stories were turned into living nightmares, where human life was sacrificed for applause. As centuries passed, voices began to rise against the games. Some philosophers, like Seneca, had already questioned their cruelty, describing them as a place where the human soul was hardened rather than entertained. With the spread of Christianity, criticism became stronger. Tertullian and Augustine wrote openly against the arena, condemning it as a theater of blood that fed only vice. The turning point came in 404 AD. During a gladiatorial fight in Rome, a Christian monk named Telemachus entered the arena and tried to stop the violence. Accounts differ on how he died. Some say the crowd stoned him, others that the guards struck him down, but his sacrifice shocked the emperor Honorius. Soon after, the ban on gladiatorial combat was announced. The tradition that had lasted centuries was fading. Animal hunts and smaller shows lingered in some provinces, but the grand days of the Colosseum were gone. The empire itself was weakening, and with it the desire to stage such massive spectacles. The arena, once the heart of Roman identity, became a ruin of silence. Where thousands had once shouted, weeds began to grow between the stones. Looking back, the games reveal both sides of Rome, its unmatched power and its darkest hunger. They remind us that glory was built on suffering, and that the applause of the crowd often drowned out the cries of the dying. To the Romans, these shows were proof of greatness. To us, they are a warning of what happens when entertainment forgets humanity. Over time, the Roman appetite for blood began to face resistance. Philosophers such as Seneca noted how the arena did not refine the spirit, but coarsened it. When Christianity spread, objections grew louder. Writers like Tertullian and Augustine condemned the games outright, calling them places of corruption where men cheered death as if it were sport. The defining moment arrived in 404 AD. During a gladiator match, a Christian monk named Telemachus stepped into the arena and tried to separate the fighters. The crowd, furious, killed him, whether by stones or blades is told differently. Yet his courage shook Emperor Honorius, who soon decreed that gladiatorial contests should end. What had once been the pride of Rome was now a shame. Hunts and minor shows did not vanish immediately, but the great spectacles were finished. The empire itself was weakening, and without its wealth and power, the Colosseum's glory faded. Its seats emptied, its stones crumbled, and silence replaced the roar of the mob. The legacy of the games remains double-edged. They display the scale of Roman ambition, but also the cruelty hidden within its triumphs. For centuries, they symbolized Roman greatness, yet they also reveal how easily entertainment can turn into savagery when human lives are treated as nothing more than a performance.